I'm Andrea Giles, and you're listening to the Heal from Infidelity podcast, episode number 141, Your Wounded Child. Hello, and welcome to the Heal from Infidelity podcast, where courageous women learn not only to heal from their spouse's betrayal, but to become the boldest, truest, most decisive, and confident versions of themselves ever. If you know there's more for you than the life you're currently living, but don't quite know how to get there, you are in the right place. Stick around to learn how to create a life that will knock your own socks off. Is it possible? It is, and I'm here to show you how. I'm your host, Andrea Giles. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode. I hope this finds you well. I today am going to be talking about the wounds that we experience as children that show up in adulthood, how they show up. My aim for this episode is really to help you kind of self-identify some things that you are doing, behaviors that you're engaging in that might be keeping you stuck. And I also want you to see some behaviors that are not keeping you stuck, some behaviors that you're doing well. I want you to be able to identify both. And hopefully by the end of this episode, you'll have a pretty good idea of why you have done some of the things that you have done. Okay? All right. So let's go back to your family of origin. Okay, all of us have very unique experiences. No one person, the way they grew up is the same as the next, even in the same family. Isn't that interesting? Even in the same family, people can have a very, very different experience of how they grew up. For example, in mine, I have a huge blended family in my own upbringing. There are 7 of us, and the 2 oldest grew up largely outside of my home. And so they had a different experience with their mom. And then I have 2 younger brothers that are 8 and 9 years younger than I am. So even when I was graduating high school, they were still quite a bit younger than me and were the last 2 in the home. So they had a very different experience, right? They didn't have some of the same issues with quite as much poverty and some of the other things that we dealt with. And it's probably the same for you, that you probably had different experiences than your siblings had, right? So to start us off, I'm going to be talking about 3 typical family roles, and I want you to listen and see where you land in this, okay? All right. First is the hero child. This is the one who is the pride of the family. There's a lot of empowerment given to this kid, okay? Interestingly enough, though, there's overt empowerment and covert shaming. Okay, let's talk about this a little bit. This hero child is given more power in the family than what is appropriate and what should be. But this child also is not allowed to have a lot of needs, and their achievements are in the service of the family. It's to make the family look good, right? A hero child can be placed into roles that are very unhealthy, such as like a surrogate spouse, the comforter, the peacemaker. This can be the one that people look to make everything okay. In dysfunctional marriages, this child can be the one that is the confidant, the one that the parent talks to and shares their troubles with, sometimes venting about the other parent to this kid, okay? This hero child in adult relationships is often very high functioning, very responsible, pretty competent, successful, okay? They get the job done. They know how to get the job done. The underbelly to this, though, is that they are not allowed needs of their own in the home that they grew up in. It's always needing to look the part, make everybody look good, right? And so if their accomplishments are kind of propping up the family, what happens when this person is struggling or when they fail or when they don't get the grade or don't get the achievement? If everybody's counting on this person to make everything seem like it's okay or to look like it's okay to the outside world, imagine the pressure when something goes wrong, right? This is where covert shaming can come in. This is where comments can be made to this child that cut, that shame, that you're not living up to what we expect of you. This is where really, really high expectations can be put on somebody in the name of, you're so amazing. Look how amazing you are. And then that person is expected to be amazing all the time. And when they're not, they can be met with quite a bit of backlash. Okay, so what does the hero child often struggle with in adulthood? The hero child often struggles with vulnerability, openness, and receptivity. Okay, so vulnerability. It makes sense that if the hero child is constantly trying to put out fires, keep the peace, be responsible, be seen as responsible, the peacemaker, the comforter, all of those things, it can feel exceptionally scary to this person to expose vulnerabilities, to expose that they do in fact have needs, that they do in fact have feelings, right? Being open about that can possibly elicit some shame. It can possibly elicit, there's something wrong with me, that I have needs. Because growing up, they were not given a place to have needs, right? Receptivity. Let's talk about that. Why would that be a struggle? First of all, receptivity, the short form of that is receptive, right? This hero child might not be able to let other people in at a deep level either. They might have some guarded walls up of kind of putting on the face of the helper, of the peacemaker, all of those things without really being open to another person's vulnerability because it might feel very scary to them. Okay. So for example, if somebody grew up with that mentality that I need to put on a show, I can't show weakness, things like that, as an adult, it could feel very scary to let their guard down enough to really be receptive and let somebody else in because it shows vulnerability in them. Isn't that interesting that to receive somebody else's vulnerability, we often have to let our own guard down? And that can feel very scary, right? So this hero child, it might be very wonderful. These are the people in the community that are the go-getters, going out there. This is many of you listening that you get the job done. You know how to get the job done, right? But there may be a part of you that you have been too afraid to let people see because it means risking the image. And therefore, in many ways, it means risking safety, okay? Because that's what you're taught to think as a child. And this creates some wounds. We're going to get to that, okay? The second type of child is the scapegoat child. How many of you can raise your hand and go, me? That was me. The scapegoat is the problematic, worrisome, or bad child. Scapegoat children are overtly shamed and covertly empowered. Okay, so I think this is so fascinating. So overtly shamed, so overtly, outwardly put down, criticized. Oh my gosh, can you ever get it right? You're so embarrassing. What's wrong with you? Those kind of words, right? But guess what? They're getting something from it. Covertly empowered. They know that they're being paid attention to. There's something that they are getting from it. Isn't that interesting? The parents may complain about the kid, punish the kid, talk bad about the kid, make fun of the kid, but the attention and energy that they receive gives them a pretty disproportionate amount of power. Okay, maybe more than the hero child even. Isn't that interesting? It might give them more. I have friends who grew up with really troubled siblings. I have one friend in mind who, in her case, it was her brother that just created a lot of trouble for the family, like a lot of trouble. And this friend of mine, one of the struggles of her adult life has been learning how to find peace with all of that, like how neglected many of them felt because so much attention was given to this kid who was really wreaking havoc for a lot of people, right? This kid who was so troublesome was given so much attention and time, and the kids who were kind of living in the way that the parents wanted were not getting the attention. And this can be problematic too and can create wounds. Okay. Scapegoat children may be sick in the classic sense of the world. They might have some kind of illness. They might have some disease, things like that. Or they might have oppositional behaviors like different disorders, even like ADHD, right? A lot of attention given to the kid that's bouncing off the walls at school. And, little Johnny, we need to sit with him for 2 hours after school and help him with his homework, or he won't do his homework, while little Susie is over in the corner getting the good grades, but all by herself, right? And often it is the caretakers or the whole family that are investing a lot of energy into managing this one child. Even the siblings, people that come in and out of the house, even grandparents, it can be really extended to many people that they're investing a lot of energy into this one kid. Like little Johnny needs so much attention, right? One major problem in this scenario with the scapegoat children is that this one child often is getting pinned for problems that actually have nothing to do with him. There might be major dysfunction in the parents, and it's so easy to blame all of it on the kid. Like, you are making our life so hard. When in reality, it's often that kid that can be the opportunity to really take a look at how we are parenting, how we are treating each other, things like that. But for people who developmentally don't want to do that, aren't ready to do that, it's much easier to find someone to blame it on, hence the name, the scapegoat child. We're going to take all of our family problems and we're going to pin it on this kid. And if this kid were better, then we wouldn't have these problems and we would have the family that we want, right? Okay, so for these children, they tend to be sensitive. They tend to be more emotional. And this really sad part, they often feel like an imposter. They often feel like they don't belong, like they are the outsider, and can carry that with them. They can carry those wounds with them into adulthood. Okay, last but not least, the lost child. You can probably imagine what this one is about. The lost child is the one who's ignored or abandoned. They may be seen as well behaved and not in need of much guidance or attention, right? Or they may just be too much trouble to bother with. Okay, so let me back this up a little bit. Sometimes the lost child is exhibiting hero child qualities or scapegoat child qualities, and they still carry the wound and then adapt to the wound of being a lost child. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about adaptations here in a little bit, okay? Okay, so the lost child is ignored or abandoned. And for the hero type, the parents might think that that kid just always is so responsible. They're just so responsible. Where did this kid come from? And not give them a lot of attention because they feel like this kid doesn't need much, right? Or they might see the scapegoat child and have the scapegoat child turn into a lost child by kind of dismissing and saying, you're just too much trouble to mess with, right? You're just too much trouble. And unfortunately, both hero and scapegoat children have boundaries violated. They have their boundaries violated because in both scenarios, the parents are looking for someone to blame it on or someone to pin the health of the family on. Okay, so for the hero child, as long as this person is doing well, then we're fine and everything's fine. But there's so much enmeshment happening here that if this kid falls off, if this kid, heaven forbid, gets a B instead of an A, so we can't brag about how our kid never has had a B in their life, this kid is going to feel the weight of the parents' disappointment, and the parents would lack the ability to look at it objectively and in a healthy way because they are really identifying and creating their identity with how well this kid performs, okay, or doesn't perform. This is enmeshment. Okay, so because hero and scapegoat, both those versions of children, have had their boundaries violated through that enmeshment pattern, they are more likely to grow up to be walled off, just closing it down, not letting a lot of people in. Okay, it can be very hard for them to trust, very hard to let people in. Now, a lost child who also has abandonment type wounds of just kind of feeling neglected. So this is not the lost child where the parents are giving all the attention to this kid. This is the kid who is ignored and neglected, like you're not worth our trouble. This kid can very much grow up to be boundaryless, where they become heavy pursuers of people's acceptance, or when they allow certain behaviors that others wouldn't. Others with better boundaries would not allow, right? Because they have been the scapegoat, they might think that they are not worth more and just put up with a bunch of BS as adults that they should not, okay? So what happens with these wounds? As you well know, wounds continue throughout our life. It's part of life that we continue to be wounded at different times. It just happens, right? But what happens with these childhood wounds, the way that we fit into our family of origin, is that we do learn to adapt. We are very adaptable. The problem is that sometimes the adaptations that we take on are not particularly helpful to the cause, such as the hero child that grows up to have pretty high walls, right? Very hard to get to, very private, very hard to reach. It's an adaptive pattern that they develop as a child to kind of self-protect. Like if I let my wall down, it's just going to hurt more. If I disappoint, it's going to hurt more. So I got to keep that wall up, right? The problem though is that this adaptation can make a healthy, intimate relationship really difficult. Really difficult. Okay, so let's talk about infidelity. That's why you're here, right? How does this matter and show up around infidelity? For many people, part of why infidelity occurs is because there's some kind of thing that is creating some emotion that feels different than what you're currently experiencing. So if you're in a relationship where it's pretty walled off, where it's pretty private, that there's not a lot of communication, there's not a lot of vulnerability, all of that, it can feel quite intoxicating to meet somebody where you feel like you can let your wall down. It can feel almost like this person is saving you from yourself. It can feel very much like a drug. Again, very, very intoxicating. And I have talked to people who say things like, they made me feel something that I haven't felt in such a long time. And the lie here is that, one, if you were to ditch the spouse and go be with this person, that is going to be what this relationship would be with this person. That is a big fat lie, okay? Big fat lie number two is that you can't have that kind of thing in your own marriage. That's a big fat lie. Why? Because it's less about the people involved and more about what the people are doing, how they're showing up for each other, how high the walls are, how low the walls are there boundaries, are there no boundaries? And these are things that can be learned. They can be learned. We can learn how to develop these things out. With that first scenario of the lie number one of thinking that if I run away with this person, this is how it's always going to be. In reality, that honeymoon period, that it is a dopamine hit, like it is a drug hit to our body. That does taper down. It really, truly does. And then in comes normal life where guess what? We go back to our old patterns. We go back into the same old coping skills. These are our adaptive skills. We've adapted putting up a wall, hiding, fighting, being aggressive, all of these things, right? Those behaviors are going to come right back. They're going to come right back if they are not seen very clearly and dealt with and healed, okay? So where to go from here? Where to go from here is to understand where we're at in our mind when we are feeling certain things, okay? And the beautiful thing is that we can go from this wounded child into this adaptive child, okay? Where we adapt, where we are a little more mature than this wounded child, where we have taken on some adaptive things, like I need to survive in this world, so this is how I'm going to survive. And then we can move into the wise adult, where we don't need to protect ourselves so much, where we don't need those adaptive habits that we formed, because we can handle the vulnerability of really addressing our wounded child and looking at what's there and trying to heal. So I want to give you some characteristics of the adaptive child, and then I want to give you some characteristics of the wise adult. And what I'd like you to do is, as I'm reading these, I want you to just kind of check in with yourself and go, okay, where do I hang out most? With the adaptive child qualities or with the wise adult qualities? And please, no judgment of yourself when you are hearing these things, okay? This is from Pia Melody, these traits. She is the one who coined these. Okay, the adaptive child is black and white, perfectionistic, relentless, rigid, harsh, hard, certain, tight in body, short-term thinker. Even just reading that out just now, one of the ones that jumped out to me is relentless. Sometimes I have clients that just cannot let something go. They have to hound it, and it'll go on for hours with their partner, and their partner's kind of begging for mercy. Like, I don't know what to say to you that's going to fix this or that's going to make it better. And they just cannot let it go. It's like a dog with a bone, like cannot let it go. When they're in the space, or when you find yourself in the space, you can kindly and lovingly and gently say, oh, I'm in my adaptive child. This is that child that developed to survive. I'm thinking that I need to survive right now. And what if I don't? What if I'm okay? What if I'm safe? And you can give yourself time and space to step back into and bring back online your wise adult. Okay, so what is our wise adult? Our wise adult is the part of us that has the ability to move out of this protective mode and scan out and see more, see the big picture, see what other pieces are here, see more objectively. The wise adult is able to assess the real threat of the perceived wound, okay? We have perceived wounds, things that we think might hurt us, or things that have hurt us, right? Things that have hurt us. And then in this wise adult space, we can stand back and go, okay, what is the real actual threat here? And this is what is called your second consciousness. It's a higher awareness. You're able to see more. You're able to be more flexible. You can strategize for long-term outcomes that are beneficial, not just to you, but to everyone involved. Just to be clear, Pia Melody, in her original work with this, she called it the functional adult, where I have learned all of this. With Terry Real and his training, they call it the wise adult. But here's some of the characteristics of the wise adult, okay? Nuanced, realistic, forgiving, flexible, warm, yielding, humble, relaxed in body, long-term thinker. How different would your day be today if you had a little bit more of that online? I want to read those again. Nuanced, realistic, forgiving, flexible, warm, yielding, humble, relaxed in body, long-term thinker. What would change for you? What would be different? There's so many things here to look at, so many things to consider. And part of your healing, right away when you first find out about the infidelity, that for most people, that adaptive child is loud, so loud. That wound has been hit on, okay? That wound for so many people, some of those early wounds have been exposed and they are raw and bleeding. And your adaptive child, and just for a reference point, when we think about the approximate emotional age for the adaptive child, it's around 12 to 14, okay? 12 to 14 is what we're looking at. The adaptive child is trying to survive. They don't want to die, okay? They don't want to go hide away. They want to often fight, stand up for themselves, or duck and cover, right? As a way to self-protect. Like a child, a baby who has no way of protecting, they're completely dependent. The adaptive child's a little bit older and have taken on these traits to help protect them. Many of you are probably hanging out in the space because you have been really hurt. That wounded child has been set off. Your adaptive child has kicked in, and the wise adult has left the room because of the deep pain of this, the deep hurt of it, the deep meanings that you have associated with it. Now, we all do this, and we will till the day we die. I recently heard in one of the trainings I did, for better or for worse, that even the healthiest people, even the most emotionally healthy people, the goal is to stay with your wise adult 70% of the time. 70%, that's with like the most wise people who work this stuff all the time, who work on themselves all the time. 70%. That means 30% of the time they're offline. They are in the adaptive child. Now we can learn ways to work with that adaptive child so we don't cause harm to ourselves or others. But I thought that was so interesting. Like, this is not going to go away. But what we can do is work with, we can learn skills. We can learn how to keep the wise adult online and how to work with the adaptive child when that adaptive child is present. Okay, so to wrap this up for today, I mainly wanted you to identify where you land with those three sets of children, the roles of children, the hero child, the lost child, or the scapegoat child. Which one do you most fall into? And what do you think you learned to do to adapt to being seen that way, viewed that way, treated that way? What do you think you did? And how is that affecting you now? Again, I can almost bet that for most of you listening, when that adaptive child is present, it's because the infidelity has hit a nerve, a strong, painful, wounded child nerve. And that wounded child is activated, and those adaptive child behaviors are loud. They're loud. This is a part of us that wants to yell and scream or fight or wall up, go away, get really aggressive or get really quiet. The goal is to be able to move towards a more calm space where we can be more objective, where we can see things more clearly, not in the black and white, but a little more nuance, where we can get more information without falling apart. Okay, that's the goal here. It does come with time. It comes with practice. It comes with intention, but we can't do any of it if we can't see where we land in the first place. Okay. So take a look at that. Maybe get an idea of your spouse or partner and where they land. It'll give you information. It'll teach you maybe why each of you are responding in the way that you are right now, and hopefully give you a little bit of direction of where to go next. All right, that's what I have for you today. Thank you so much for being here. If you go into my show notes, be sure to register for upcoming classes. I also have an Instagram account. I'm the Infidelity Coach. Go follow me there. I post in there pretty regularly. Also, it would mean the world if you would be willing to leave a review. If you have not yet reviewed or left a rating or review or both, I appreciate it so much. And be sure to share this with anyone that you think it would benefit. All right. Thank you so much. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Heal from Infidelity podcast. If you would like to be kept in the know about upcoming free classes, new podcast episodes, and other ways of working with me, go subscribe to my weekly email. You can subscribe at AndreaGiles.com/lies-about-infidelity/. Again, it's AndreaGiles.com/lies-about-infidelity/. I will see you next time.